Well, welcome everybody to this beautiful, gorgeous Saturday in springtime. We've officially rounded the bend to springtime. And before we begin, I want to have a moment of gratitude. I think I want to say gratitude first and foremost to the ancestors who have lived on this land for thousands of years. And these are the Onasetis people. We know them as the Wapo, but that wasn't what they called themselves. They called themselves the Onasetis. And they're still here. They're still here. They're here in the breeze. They're here in the soil. They're here in the trees. They're here in the hawk that flies overhead. So we need to remember this because it's with us all the time. We are a part of it. We are not separate from it. And so with that, I want to extend my gratitude, of course, to Grace Church for including me in this speaker series. And as Amy said, I think, most of the speakers were more traditional religious people. And I would consider myself more of a spiritualist. But I guess I would just consider myself a human being living on planet Earth. And what that means to me is that the gift of life is all around us, and it is the universal source that connects us all. That it doesn't matter where we live in the world, it doesn't matter what our religion, what our color, what our class, there's one moon. Yeah, that always gives me pause, one moon since the dawn of time. So gratitude for the ancestors, gratitude to Grace Church. And I want to give a special gratitude to my partner in crime in the garden landscaping. That's Edie Couch. And she's the reason that we're connected here today. And then I would be remiss if I didn't call out, I'm sorry, I'm just spacing for a second, Sergio and Seraphine, right? And these are our two men who really do most of the labor, most of it by themselves on this property. They're not allowed to cut the flowers, though. That's my job. I think I scared Seraphine a couple of years ago. But this has been a process. It's a labor of love. And I've lived on this land for nearly 20 years. But I would say that what we're doing with the garden landscaping has only been about 3 years. In fact, we're going into our third season. So some of the beds were here, some of these trees, of course, were here. But I think that what started happening was when I realized how much space I had and my kids got older. We took out, there was a play set, there was extensive lawns that were here when we bought the property. And for me, it's not enough to just take out a lawn. I need to kind of understand what I'm replacing it with and what's kind of the best method, right? So it took me years of just listening to the beings that are here, paying attention for what they needed. And then last year, I kind of woke up to the native bees. And that's kind of a long story, but what happened was I was noticing that there were these native bees on the property. The more I kept putting in more pollinator plants. And so, all flowers are sort of pollinator flowers, but some of them do attract different invertebrate pollinators based on what they are. And I started paying more attention, and as I started noticing, I was noticing that there's a difference between the native bees and the honeybees, which is kind of a no-brainer. I think we know that honeybees were brought in from Europe. They're sort of, they are farm animals, whereas the native bees are wildlife. And this is kind of like not really talked about. We're getting more awareness around this, but why is this important? Because to be able to cultivate the land in a way that keeps nourishing us, we need to really feed the native pollinators. And so what I've been doing over the past year is I got involved with the Xerces Society, and they work to protect invertebrate pollinators. And I'm part of California Bumblebee Watch, and it's community science. And our season is from March to October, and I actually net the bees. I refrigerate them to slow them down. Then we take pictures of them, upload the data, and then they, when they warm up, they wake up and they go. So we don't harm them at all. But this is important because we need to keep track of these populations. And then having nearly an acre here, what I feel like my responsibility to keep track of is what feeds them. So yes, what we're doing here is we're feeding the bees, basically. I mean, it brings me so much joy, but really that's kind of my eye. And you know, it's interesting, there's some plants that will feed the honeybees and not feed the native bees. There are some plants that are toxic to honeybees, but native bees will populate off of them. So it is really interesting, and I'm learning more and more, and I'm not afraid to move plants out, change them around, take them out. And so that's kind of what we're doing here, and it's an ongoing process. And so today, you all get to be part of this process. I'm going to talk for a little bit, but as a spiritual self-help coach, I feel like my job is to lead people into experience. So after I talk a little bit, we're actually going to do a walking meditation around the property. It's not a very long walk, and I'll explain that in a little minute. But what that does is it actually grounds us into the land. And I spend countless hours walking these paths. And so not only is it, you know, it's mental health for me, really, just being able to ground into the awareness and connect with the land in that way, but also meditation, right? So I mean, I'm sure on your speaker series, we talk so much, we hear so much about going into a meditative state, and why is that important? Well, for me, I'm a survivor of childhood trauma, and most of the people I work with are trauma survivors. And when I started working with mostly women about a dozen years ago, I would ask them a question: when do you feel the most at peace, the most whole? Because trauma sort of, you know, robs us of that. And 9 times out of 10, the answer is when I'm in nature. And it's not just because it's pretty, it's not just because it smells good. There is actually scientific data now that proves that it connects us to our nervous system in ways that trigger positive responses that work to actually restructure our brain chemistry. So this is real, this is science. And so all you have to do is walk out in your backyard, tend to kitchen plants. You know, I spend time in New York City occasionally because my daughter lives there, and I actually grew up close to New York City. And when I go there, you know, it is harder to connect with nature. I know when people are in big cities, they ask me, well, how do I do that? Well, okay, so the 3 things I came up with when I'm in New York is the pigeons. There's lots of pigeons. And that kind of goes back to my childhood, because I grew up in Irvington, New Jersey, which was, and I think still is, a ghetto. And my grandmother had this tiny piece of land, and she was a Polish immigrant. And it was in a chain link fence overlooking the freeway. But every day she would take me outside to feed the pigeons. And I could see in her this excitement, this actual love that would come across when she would be connecting with them. And that grew me. Yeah, that grew me. So the pigeons in New York. Dandelion. You know, dandelion grows, you know, probably everywhere in the United States, if not beyond, right? And one thing that really blows my mind is that it grows in the cracks in the sidewalk. And so I'm an herbalist from way back, and what I understand about dandelion is it's not actually a great pollination flower, but what it is it's an abundant food source and medicine. And so sometimes, like when I'm driving through a place and I see like a big field of dandelion, and I think, the medicine is all right here. It's all right here. All we need to do is pay attention. Yeah. And so the third thing, again, I'm going to call out Moon. Moon is with me wherever I go. I have a really strong connection to Moon, and we all do. And that's the thing, is like, I'm not special. You know, that some people call me a flower whisperer, bee whisperer. Not really. I think I'm a survivalist. And so this is the place where I feel the most whole, the most at ease. And so to be able to share that with you today is such a joy. And I want to say it's a treat, but it shouldn't be, because this is our innate soul wisdom. We all came into this world knowing how to connect with Gaia, with our supreme source. Just we forget sometimes, life gets busy, life gets in the way, and sometimes we just have to get out of our own way. Yeah, so that's what we're going to do today. We're just going to trust and get out of our own way. So, yesterday when I was walking through garden, words come to me. I'm a writer. And so then, I was very inspired to write what I call a poetic prose. And I'm going to read that to you because the thing I love about things that are poetic is we're not only using our intellect, right? It's when we write poetic prose, or even when we write poetry, or when we do art, we're using both sides of our divine masculine and divine feminine. And I don't mean that in terms of gender. I mean that in terms of energetic balance. And it's what we are at the core. And so when I say sometimes we need to get out of our way, sometimes we need to get out of what Ursula Le Guin calls the father tongue. And there's nothing wrong with the father tongue. It governs intellect. It governs wisdom. It helps us to get stuff done. But the problem is when we don't balance that with the mother tongue. And the mother tongue contributes to our intuition, our creativity, our nurturance. And sometimes we devalue that. We don't look at it as important. So that's the way I like to write. I like to write in a poetic prose. And so I'm just going to read this to you because I feel like there's a lot of good feeling in it. And this is called My Garden, the Lover. Garden is not a wild place. She will not have poison oak coursing through her landscape or puma prints along the hillside. She is cultivated, domesticated, and tamed. Yet still she follows a mysterious cadence that knows no bounds. Within her irreverent dance of wild life, garden exists to shelter, feed, nourish, and elate all beings who dwell in this surrounding space. There is a certain amount of safety felt in garden's embrace that offers a place to rest my body, relax my mind, and replenish my innate soul wisdom. And perhaps the very best thing about garden is that she lives at home with me. No, wait, she is my home. We thrive on shared soil, drink the same water, breathe the collective air. Garden wholly commands my attention as much as she gives, much like a small child or a new lover. One who requires tending with deep devotion, careful witnessing, and unconditional love. And within the resonance of rapt attention is a supreme exercise in lovemaking beyond the human realm. I wander alongside gardens several times each day and night. The path leads me to new discoveries about the abundant life force energy from which I am interwoven. As I seek to understand her more deeply, I observe the patterns that collide against asymmetry and balance, resilience and longevity, etched in invisible seeds, catalyzed by moon's reliable return over and over and over. I listen for baby bird calls and examine the connectivity of nests, intertwined with sticks and palm fronds and lichen and my hair. I contemplate the miracle in the flowers as they fearlessly cycle between life and death, again and again and again. Without seeing them, I know the wild bees from the honeybees by the timbre of their unique buzz, buzz, buzzing. I pause to comprehend the ornate stitching of the collective fabric of being floating on the fragile wings of swallowtail. I smell the wondrous fragrances of orange, jasmine, and rose, wafting on palm rattle breeze, and I feel energized within this sensual bliss. This is right relationship, a consummate engagement of being and knowing and encompassing one another to the tune of a universal heartbeat that honors the eternal lineage of my non-human family as equal to, if not greater than, my transient human existence on Earth. See, that's why I wanted to read that. Thank you. Thank you. So, in that is a greater understanding of the indigenous wisdom that we call animism. How many people here are familiar with the word animism? Yeah, kind of, right? What does that mean? So indigenous wisdom, and really most every other culture except for ours, considers all beings as alive, sacred, and interrelated. And so when we start to soften our gaze on the world and we look through that lens of connectivity, we see that Olive is the same as my grandmother, no different. No different. She holds me just the same as my real grandmother would. And so when I care in that way, when we begin to care in that way, there is really less chance for destruction, is the truth. And so getting pulled out of that innate knowing, remember I said it's innate, we all know this already, we can feel it or we wouldn't be here, you know? When we get pulled out of that innate wisdom, then there's more chance for destruction, right? And so that's why this is important. This is like revolutionary, even though, like I said, it should just be, and I'm going to quote Jacob, this should just be common sense. You know, and it is common sense. But, you know, how do we reintegrate ourselves? So one way, and this is the practice that we're going to do, is we're going to do a walking meditation. And so whenever I teach and I wax spirituality, I have to point to my favorite spiritualist, the Vietnamese Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh. And he was a Buddhist monk. He passed his body, I think, about 3 years ago. And he was a political activist in the 60s. And he was just a very powerful human being who really, I mean, I consider him to be the epitome of balancing the divine feminine and the divine masculine. He was so strong, and his teachings were so simple, yet so powerful. And one of his teachings was, walk as if your feet are kissing the earth. Walk as if your feet are kissing the earth. And so, again, we need to get out of our own ways, because when we start to think about it too much, we'll walk and we'll start to think, you know, feeling my feet on the earth. Are they kissing the earth? You know, what are they doing? So what I'm going to ask you to do today is get out of your own way and engage all of your sense perceptions. So we're going to do this, it's silent meditation. You know those pictures where you see the monks in their robes walking single file on a mountaintop? Well, that's going to be us today. We're the monks. We are the monks. And so it's a silent walking meditation, and I want you to engage all of your sense perceptions. So sound. And there's going to be other sounds that aren't the birds, and that's okay too, because the practice is to be able to do this in the most noisy, crowded place in the world, to be able to drop in and connect and find this ancient resource that is here. So sound, smell, there's delicious smells throughout the garden right now. We are so blessed. Sight. Just soften your gaze and let your eyes fall where they will. No trying, just let it all be. And sensing, just feeling what that energy feels like. And so what we're going to do is I'm gonna go over there, and I have my sound bowls. So I'm going to play them while you're doing the meditation. And Edie's going to start so that she can show you the trail. And then you're just going to follow her along the way. And I'll hit the bowl and I'll let each person know when to go, so there's a little bit of space. If anybody wants to stop and pause and let someone go around you, that's fine too. This is for you. This is your time to feel the nourishment and the power that's there. And and that's it. And we get to do this together. And there's another idea that Louisa and I have talked about the blueprint, right? Like when we talk about this being innate wisdom, sometimes we think, well, I don't know how to do this, or this feels weird, And it's like, it's because the blueprint was destroyed. I mean, it was. And so when we gather in community, what we're doing is we're remembering together. And we're validating each other, and we're bringing it all back to life. And that's the other thing. So the one thing is we have nature. Nature is the supreme source that governs every living being on the planet. It is our innate soul family. And then the other thing is the human family, the community. And every time we show up and we connect with community in this way, we are contributing to planetary healing. Yeah. So good work. Is everyone ready to do the walking meditation? Okay, so no phones on this part and no talking. And just take a minute to drop into your body. So whatever that means for you. And I'm going to go over here, and then we can kind of line up single file. And then when you come back to your seat, I'll continue to play until the last person is back. So I want you to just sit in your seat and integrate the experience. Okay? Okay. And when I tone the bell, you can go. All right. So you know how you're going. Mm-hmm. All right. I'm going to break the silence. I almost don't want to. So, before we continue, I usually end most meditative practices with a Buddhist prayer, and I would typically do this at the end, but since I feel like this was the, coming into our bodies and grounding, I want to do it now, and then we'll move on to more talk. So, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings rejoice in the well-being of others. And may all beings live in peace, free from greed and hatred. And so that is also a Buddhist prayer taken from the Four Immeasurables. And again, when I say all beings, I mean that hummingbird that you met today, your new sister, that swallowtail, your new father. We're all connected. And I hope that this experience, this practice, has helped you to feel a little bit more connected and to know that this is your right, your birthright. Yeah, and I encourage you all to practice it more because you know it's in you, you know what to do. So thank you for allowing me that. That was really special for me to be part of.